Bien, bonjour tout le monde. Donc là, on fait.
All right, hello everyone. So this session will be mostly in French, but we do have a guest, and she will be speaking English. She will be using the simultaneous interpreters. So this session will be focused mainly on a couple of examples of big success stories, of very innovative IA projects. AI projects with very young dynamic teams, and I think it's really always good for us to know, to see that Generation 2030 is really, helped by young people. We will have Maryse Colson, who's marketing director at Digazu. She works at EURA NOVA, and she will explain what she does and what those companies do as well. She will focus mostly on big results that they have managed to obtain so far. And then we'll have Jean-Baptiste Masson, who's head of a lab at the Institut Pasteur. He's professor at PRAIRIE, and he founded Avatar Medical. Again, it's a very promising field. And then we will have Mrs. Katrin Schulte, who is a PhD student in a research project in AI at the Bielefeld Universität. So we will start with the first one on the list, i.e. Mrs. Colson. Maryse Colson, please, will you take the floor? And I hope it's working. Yes, it is working. Fantastic. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is indeed Maryse Colson, and my info on LinkedIn was not entirely accurate. I'm in charge of company culture at EURA NOVA, and I'm also in charge of public relations, exterior relations, which is why I am here today. I'm going to give you a small... This is me. So I'm going to give you a presentation about EURA NOVA. I prepared everything in English, and I thought it was relatively clear, so I'll switch to English now, if that's okay with you, since it's how I prepared it.
Comment est né EURA NOVA? In Europe need to innovate in their industrial sectors. They want to design new business lines, craft new products, offer tailor-made services to their users. To do so, they know they can tap into data technologies, but they need available and easy-to-use toolboxes that let them focus on their own expertise while working as a technology exoskeleton. Indeed, IT is not their job, it is ours. For 13 years now, EURA NOVA specializes in data technologies at the heart of Europe. Our name, inspired by Christopher Columbus' exploration traveled towards the Terra Nova, translates our mission, which is to explore science, serve organizations, and craft solutions. By exploring science, we can grasp technology opportunities and stay at the edge of scientific state-of-the-art. We make this knowledge useful for our customers and partners. We support their ambitions by designing and delivering world-class innovative projects with them. This way, our scientific knowledge connects with real-world problems and merge into usable toolboxes that can speed up the economy of Europe. Our ultimate goal is to have a positive impact on society thanks to valuable IT solutions, inspired by cutting-edge science and grounded in industries. We cannot reach this goal all alone. With our customers and partners, we co-create IT products and joint ventures. With our people, we encourage intra- and entrepreneurship. With our ecosystem, we fund spin-offs, spin-outs, and startups. And inside our company, we adopt a fail-fast approach. We believe that together with our customers, with our partners, and our people, we can create the European economy of tomorrow.
Thank you, Maryse. So we will have questions for each of them after the introduction pitch. So I will give the micro to Jean-Baptiste now, who will speak about his startup Avatar.
Merci beaucoup. Donc.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That is indeed my name. My presentation was in English, but I'll deliver it in French. My name is Jean-Baptiste Masson. I work at the Institut Pasteur. We're a small partner of PRAIRIE as well. The head of PRAIRIE is right here. So I'm going to tell you about one of the projects of the laboratory, which is in the end turned into a startup. It's nice for you to classify me into the success story category. It's very flattering. At the beginning of the project, we had a project called DIVIN, which is an acronym for a larger project, and I actually can't remember what it means, so whatever, but it's an acronym. You can see the images, especially in the upper left-hand corner. It was a project that was based on microscopy at the beginning. And the idea, one of the main ideas, was to interact and deal with data, but with 3D aspect. We worked with Mohamed Elberi, who wrote a brilliant thesis. And we also worked with Maxime Daon. He actually died since then. And we figured, why not work with virtual reality? And it worked really well from the get-go. At the beginning, it was mostly about us having fun, and then it turned into something much bigger. So you can see here a rat brain on the left-hand side. Well, actually, it's probably on your right-hand side. In the center, you have Drosophil cells, and on the right-hand side, you have MRI imaging. And the idea was to have a look at this representation and optimize the different elements of representation through IA in real time. The idea is for an interaction to be acceptable in VR or in AR. You need, for the refresh rate, the speed at which it's displayed, to be around 90 Hertz. So there were a lot of constraints to do with both hardware and software for things to go fast enough. On the right-hand side, you can see another extension of those types of approaches. So we focus solely on science for this one, with clouds of dots, dot clouds, and you can see the trajectory of proteins inside of a cell in a different software. We were collaborating with the Curie Institute on that project, so we had some doctors from the Curie Institute. It's in Paris. It's an oncology laboratory. There's also a hospital together with it, the Curie Hospital, and they thought the project was fun, and they said, could we not see a MRI image in there? And so what you can see at the bottom is an injected MRI of a patient with breast cancer, and on the right-hand side you can see what it looks like in our system. So it's real-time rendering. It's not segmentation. The idea is that so long as you don't lose information, there's no data loss in what we're representing here. So here this is captured inside the system, but it's on a 2D screen. The impact, I mean, when you look at it with a headset, it's really amazing. It looks like you have really the thing right in front of you, an object in front of you, and you can imagine what you will do. So surgeons, for example, we notice surgeons don't always look at the data, and when we showed them the data from radiology, very often they didn't really know what we were talking about. So better not get ill is what I'm telling you. So you have to do projects inside hospitals. So we thought it was important for us to work with a startup. Inside Institut Pasteur, we have a whole array, I mean, there's a whole department to support a certain number of projects, to find industrial partners or become a startup of their own if necessary. So we got a huge amount of support. I probably have negative economic knowledge, so I was doing a very, very bad job at PR. They were very stressed about me being here today, actually. They're quite afraid of what I may tell you. So we did find partners, including a CEO who used to work in the US, and it made it possible to for us to go for an iLab. So iLab is a procedure in France to create a startup based on the laboratory. So we did that, and the company was created with the five people, Xavier Vertel, who's one of the CEOs now, and his colleague Maryse Colson, and one of the persons who were in charge in the Pasteur department to help encourage the creation of startups. She really liked our project, and so she's now a part of it. So yeah, this is another slide that I stole from the official deck to show you about the timelines. This is just to give you a general idea. The only important point right now is that we are being validated by the FDA. Of course, you have to think about compatibility between software between the US and Europe. So we did a certain number of things. We deployed systems both in the US and in the EU. And I don't want to be too long, but yeah, this is basically where we are at the moment with different systems that have been purchased or will be purchased. And for the rest, I think we're making relatively good progress. Thank you for your attention.
Merci Jean-Baptiste.
Thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste. And then we now come to our last presentation by Katrin Schulte. She will be introducing us to another application of industrial transfer. And behind the success story, what will be highlighted is how we can transfer innovation to startups and to the industry as a whole.
Yeah, thank you very much for your introduction. Hello from my side. I'm Katrin Schulte, and I'm a PhD student at the Bielefeld University of Applied Science in Germany. And 2020, I finished my master's degree in electrical engineering, so I'm engineering and power systems. Since 2019, I'm working as a research assistant at the Institute for Technical Energy Systems in the working group Grids and Energy Systems. And currently, I am working in the German-French research project AI4Belgium, which I would like to present you today. My research topics are the integration of renewable energies, the use of AI in power systems, and the forecast of photovoltaic systems. A very short presentation of our working group. In Bielefeld, our working group researches solutions for the integration of renewable energies and electric vehicles into the power system. And the use of AI-based systems for grid operations, as well as intelligent measurement technologies. Professor Haurock is the head of the group, and yeah, we are working in different research projects, such as the AI4Belgium project. This slide. Yeah, the success story I would like to present you today is a German-French research project, AI4Belgium. Some key data before the project is funded in the funding program German-French joint call for proposals on artificial intelligence. We started last year in 2021 in October, and the project will end in September 2024. And yeah, the project budget is about 1 million euro. But now to the AI4Belgium project, and in the long form, AI on the edge for a secure and autonomous distribution grid control with a high share of renewable energies. Yeah, the project is about the application of AI in the power system. We are investigating a distributed AI platform for the control of battery storage systems in households to provide flexibilities for the power system. And in this context, we are investigating a decentralized AI approach with cognitive edge computing. So this means that we not process the data in a central cloud, but we process the data in edge controllers direct in the household where the data are generated. And this guarantees us the data security and secure energy supply. Here you can see our partner in the project. We are working with research institutions from Germany and from France. In Germany, it's the Bielefeld University and the Bielefeld University of Applied Science. And in France, the University of Grenoble-Alpes. And so we have experts from the power system, from edge computing, and from artificial intelligence. Myself, I'm from the power system side. And we are working with 2 partners from industry. In Germany, it's the Westfalen-Weser Netz GmbH. It's a German distribution grid operator. And in France, we are working with Atos World Grids. They develop IT solutions for the energy sector. Yeah, I think that's enough from my side. I have some more slides, but I think this is enough. And yeah, I'm happy to tell you more about our project. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will come back to Maryse with asking some example of the contribution of EURA NOVA to help the development of some startup or the activity of some startups, if you have some, but I believe.
Yes, I do. I switch again in French, I guess. Oui, donc effectivement, quand EURA NOVA
When EURA NOVA was set up back in 2008, our ambition was to set up startups because we had noted that there were only a few of them in Europe. So our business model at EURA NOVA was to gather research in computer science. We work with a computer science network. They have published 55 scientific publications since 2008. So our ambition is to remain at the cutting edge of scientific technologies, but we also want to work from a practical point of view, give advice to companies to understand the difficulties that they're facing. And our ambition is to, well, first identify problems within the companies, then presenting a cutting edge technology and a cutting edge solution. It can be a product, a framework, a software. We want to give companies the possibility to solve their problems with the solutions that we suggest. And for instance, we have developed Digazu, and Digazu is the proof of concept that our data carry values. Digazu is a giant cannelloni, if you want, well, using here an image. And other products, other solutions are being developed. Of course, we are full of ideas. We cannot develop all of them, but we are now working on 4 ideas. First of all, a program which is driven by GDPI by design. This is a program based on LNP technologies to extract data and to privatize data in documents. Then there is another program that aims at harmonizing PET scan images to do cancer research. This project is called Harmonist. Then there is a third one based on neurons networks. It aims at optimizing investment portfolios. So based on the concerns that we identify in the industries, well, we try to propose meaningful the right solutions that offer the right product. Now, this is true for Avatar, but also for the other 2 international projects whose international dimension lies in the content of the project, in the cooperations. I'd like to ask you how you see this international dimension and how important is this international dimension in your research project? Well, right from the start, right from the idea of building up a startup for the medical and the hospital market, we decided to turn to the US market. Then we met Xavier Vartel, who was living in the US and creating companies there. He had visited the Pasteur Institute with his company, and since he liked the project, he started heading it and became the director. Now, the second important item of this international dimension is the ecosystem. Now, the ecosystem is not easy, but it is very efficient in terms of working in the US and applying it to medical applications. We wanted to have this project validated by the FDA. Our idea was that if another company had already validated something, we could succeed in meeting the first step criteria and having the project validated by hospitals. So there are research use only softwares that can be used for research projects in hospital centers. And once we are validated, we can move to the next steps. Now, of course, the US is a huge country. Not all the states operate in the same manner. So we have different partners, but regulation, perhaps here in Europe, is more complex when it comes to software, at least. Maryse.
Merci.
Thank you. Now, of course, we want to export our project, and here in Belgium, we can rely on the support of AWEX that helps us in exporting our project and in making the project known in the Middle East, in other countries of Asia, in the US, of course. Now, what is key is to be part of the European economic fabric, because I think that we also need to bridge the gap between research, ideas on the one hand, and then the marketing of ideas. Now, I think that the pace in the US and here in Europe is not exactly the same. Now, here in Europe, we are focused on looking for perfection, and our engineers appreciate nice outcomes, nice algorithm. And I think that this is something that we have to avoid when we want to export our activities. I think that we have to accept that the project is not perfect. The idea is really to move forward in a nutshell, even if the project is not perfect. Thank you. Katrin, over to you.
I'm ready.
So how do you see the role of international collaboration in Europe or larger?
Yeah, it's very important. Our strategy, or international strategy of our working group is to cooperate an international project, because the energy transition is an international challenge. The whole Europe is a whole challenge for whole Europe, because the aim of Europe is, of course, climate protection and increasing of renewable energies. So for us, it's really important to work and to cooperate in an international context, because it is easier to integrate such AI systems in an international context when we work together on these topics.
Okay, thank you. Donc, une question également pour tout le monde. Donc,
I have a question for all of you. What are the hurdles that you've identified? What are the main challenges when it comes to transferring research outcomes or to create startups at the national and international level? Where are the main challenges? Now, as far as we are concerned, one of the main challenges when it comes to medical applications or medical centers, it is about using machine learning in a medical context. Now, there are new guidelines on how to check that an algorithm is performant, it's efficient enough, how it can be included in hospital practice. So we will need to comply with these guidelines, but in many cases, planning algorithm, for instance, have not been checked ahead or prior to their application. We will also need to define which methods need to be used for the processing of scanners, what are the databases that will need to be used and tested. So there is a lot. There are a lot of rules that require close controls, close monitoring, but they remain very ambiguous. There are also many interactions with people. And cross-checks are also necessary. But how can you demonstrate in an image analysis system that no abnormality will occur? It can never be perfect. So the idea is really to move forward along with the FDA, and it goes the same for the patent strategy, where there are still some loopholes and shortcomings and a lot of unknown. So as far as Europe is concerned now, the CE marking regulation is undergoing changes, and we do not know exactly when the reform will come into force. So we need to have the whole file validated, and we will need, of course, to work with our partners. We are not alone because we are helped by legal firms, by experts, but we do know that the waiting time will be long, and that's why we have started with the FDA validation. So as for any codes, the more applications there are, the more codes there are to improve images. So error spreading will be difficult to work on. And scientifically speaking, I think that there will be more and more unknowns in the future. When you work with the industry, it's always easier, but from a scientific point of view, we need to have the method validated, and when you patch this, you have to identify the potential errors. Now, of course, we have the intellectual means to carry out these checks, but then we will need to have the systems being validated by a medical center. If a medical center uses the software, well, we will need to have very stringent guidelines. So what about the link with the risk-based assessment of the European Commission? This is a very good thing. In some cases, when there are many stakeholders, the device manufacturer. Now, of course, the images produced by RMIs are not always the same based on the manufacturer. So the medical field is quite peculiar. In France, there were some delays. So I think that you cannot have one device here with a different visualization system, but some hospitals in Paris work both with migrant patients and patients living in Paris. And so they are faced with issues that are not the same as other hospitals face. Now, what will be quite useful is, well, beyond the main guidelines, to be supported by different bodies to know exactly what we must check, what we must validate, and to see how we can adapt solutions on a case-by-case basis and based on the local criteria. Marie Curie is a very good research institute. They work on the most complex cancer cases. So it is not only a matter of federated learning and retrieving the learning done here and there. I think there will be complexities in terms of checking the precision level. Thank you. Now coming back to research transfer to businesses. Now, managing a researcher's frustration in seeking perfection is probably an obstacle in the way. Now, one of the main challenges will be to set up the right team, because the DNA of a researcher is not the DNA of a businessman nor the DNA of an expert. So combining these different personalities is necessary if we are to build a good startup to continue doing research and exploring science and make it available to these startups that need research outcomes. Now, the public funds that are made available to businesses are also crucial. Now, for some startups, it's not easy to raise funds to get started. It is very difficult for a business to start an activity. You have to be you have to be a risk lover. So I think there are a lot of rules that exist to protect citizens and to protect companies, but we also need to protect businessmen. We need to help them starting their activity, because I think that in the future we need more of these startups. So that's a very nice question. Katrin.
Yeah, the translation wasn't ready, so I'm a little bit later. Yeah, in my opinion, the main challenge for the transfer from research to products is are the research projects of basic research or theoretical research, because it's a really long-term process to transfer the research results of theoretical research into real products. And I think this is the main challenge. We, in our research, in our working group, we are working on applied research projects. We are working with together with the industry partners, and our aim is to develop, for example, prototypes and to test these prototypes in the field of our industry partners. Yeah, so we can test it in a real environment. Yeah, of course, after this, the research results must be done ready for real products, for example, the design, or to check regulations or fine-tuning and so on. But I think applied research is a really important step to transfer research results to real products and to transfer to the industry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I will continue with you, and after I will go to the two others. What are from your point of view, the main challenge of using AI for the energy domain, and in particular for smart energy distribution?
Yeah. I think the main challenge is that the power system or the energy sector is a critical infrastructure, and so we have to guarantee the energy supply, the supply with electricity, and of course, often data security is often an issue in this topic. So I think. When we have an AI which interacts with the power system, for example, to control it, this is the main challenge using AI. So this is the reason why we are using a decentralized AI approach in our AI4DG project. So we can process the data locally where they are generated and not in a central cloud. So we can guarantee the energy supply and top data security topics.
Okay, thank you. Maryse.
Aussi dans le monde de l'énergie.
For which field? For the energy field? For the one you prefer? Now, I think that when it comes to transfer of knowledge, the main difficulty lies in data management. EURA NOVA is cooperates with small and medium companies, and the main difficulty lies in managing, handling, governing data while complying with the GDPR. Transferring data, cleaning data are where the main difficulties lie. The data engineering, I would say, is the main challenge for us. And it's not a very glamorous topic, of course. We need more data engineers. There are more training modules on data engineering. And I would say that in the future, companies, and this will be their main challenge, will need at all levels of the organization to be more familiar with data management. And I think that the most successful companies are the biggest companies that have completely shifted their mindset. They have set up a model, they have made a proof of concept and demonstrated the added value of data. And in the production phase, you sometimes need to invest in a new data platform that will collect all data and redistribute them. And again, the most successful companies are the ones that align all their teams, the companies where the top management makes a huge mindset shift. And this means, of course, organizing training on data, understanding what data science, what data engineering are all about. And these are the companies that are able to build a production data and build a model around data management. So in a nutshell, in summary, I would say that the main challenge for AI in companies has to do with data management and the participation, the involvement of the whole team around one common goal.
Dans le médical, oui.
Thank you. In the medical field, I think it's really going to be, everything will be complicated. Let's be clear. I think First of all, we have the same issue with the medical field with GDPR. It's even more constraints because it's medical. It's very likely that we'll find solutions, but we don't know whether we'll have big centralized infrastructures. Not all hospitals are at the same level in terms of digitalization. There's also a problem of non-representativity from a statistical perspective of the data that are available. And when you can see some data sets for training, for competitions, for works on oncology, for example, you have basically just healthy people who got unlucky and had cancer. When we see data from the hospitals, very often people who have liver problems also have cirrhosis. So fluorescence, the signal leaks everywhere, and there is a disjunction between what the data really looks like and what they have been used for. So that's a classic problem. But in terms of the medical field, it really has real-life implications, real-life consequences. So how do we manage mistakes if the mistakes are propagated throughout the system? Because this is not trivial. Doctors, surgeons are very enthusiastic about such tools, but it's important for them to not be too confident either in the use of such tools. In the medical field, there's been huge enthusiasm for AI for a while, supported by some articles that were true, okay, but maybe not. You know, the scientific literature was maybe sometimes a bit too cherry-picked. If one doctor works on one specific theme, of course you can optimize more than if a doctor works on several things. So it's a lot more complicated than you might think. So there's been a whole movement moving towards AI, and we saw that real life results are a lot more modest, I guess. So helping a physician, giving them something that is at least a little useful, something that works also within the framework of a hospital, it's quite another thing. So there are possibilities, but the use cases are sometimes quite different. So it can be, we can find solutions, I'm quite sure, but we need to get out of this extreme enthusiasm and start being a little bit more realistic. If everybody who works in the medical field, you know, we know that things worked well before. The question is it going to have added value? The answer is yes. Well, new technologies, we can do better, but it'll take time. And this is where we need initiatives, we need support, we need to promote also with funding some initiatives with research laboratories, people who work in hospitals with the industry to check how things are implemented on the field, check that these things really work at the right scale when they are really used. Then it also becomes really useful. It would be good if most companies who say short-term, you know, a lot of people used to work on diagnosis. Now we work more on supporting physicians, helping them, and so on and so forth. The question is, does it really help them? At the very beginning, we were quite naive. I knew nothing about the medical world either. So we got in touch with radiologists to talk about the technology, and they always said they had no time and told us to bugger off. And the radiologists told us something that makes sense. I was trained to work in 3D and see a number of things. This is useless. So they get calls all the time by people just like me who get in touch, who want to offer a new solution, and so on and so forth. They can't answer everyone. So it's quite complicated. You also have inside mechanisms where if the surgeons have a tool, the radiologists need to have it too, and so on and so forth. The surgeons are really, really big fans of such little toys, but the data actually belong to the radiologists. So the question is that the software. Do we just have stations? Do we get the data from the radiologist and then the tool is used by the surgeons, but then there's jealousy? So there's a question about mistakes, about how to deal with mistakes, but there are also questions about who is at the helm, who is using those tools, and there's a storage data storage system in hospitals. We may have something on each ward, or will each surgeon have their own little toy for their own team? It is quite complicated. We don't know whether we want to execute the inference or not. It's a complicated environment. Thank you. Okay, so there are quite a lot of points that are mentioned. You never spoke of trust. Not once did you speak of trust, but I'm guessing that it is quite important for a lot of the latest interventions with questions of safety, security, data protection, and so on and so forth. There are also some data biases that need to be counterbalanced. So I'm guessing this is one of the aspects, one of the strategic axes that we have in the EU that is supported and seen by the Commission. I guess that it probably answers some of your expectations. Data management, we saw, was a key element as well. We're just waiting for operational solutions too. We do feel that it's going to be complicated, as it should be as well, because the reality is what it is, and you cannot just detach yourself from reality entirely, and I think we'll understand that. But this is all related to your success stories. But do you have an opinion or a point of view regarding the more, performance aspect or the interest of IA? I mean, IA is going to. We thought about the smart grid already. We know about edge servers. Do you have an idea of what is at stake with those servers in order to be able to deploy really high performance IA long term? Let's maybe start with Katrin, if you don't mind.
You mentioned that you put the AI at the edge, so near the battery and the energy equipment. And do you see, or do you have some research regarding what are the challenges related to embedding the AI close to the usage? And if yes, what they are?
Yeah, I think the challenge is that we have to increase the acceptance of the users in the households. We should do more research, project and applied research. We should demonstrate our results in the real life, so the users can see the results, and yeah, we can increase acceptance of the users. And this is what we want to do in our AI4DG project. We want to demonstrate the decentralized AI platform in a real power grid or a real power system of our German system operator, Westfalen-Weser-Netz, and with a software and hardware product from Atos for the edge computing, so the user can see the advantages from AI, and we can increase the acceptance. And our aim is to show that AI could be a solution for the energy transition. I think this is only we can only realize it with demonstrations in the real world. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so for you, the capability to embed the AI near to the usage is a key to increase acceptance of AI. Yeah. Okay, clear. Maryse?
Yes, indeed. I do believe that Europe is working at the moment. I mean, the GDPR protects citizens, and it's a good thing. It also protects companies because it encourages companies to use high-quality data while respecting everybody's personal data. So it encourages us to use data that you can trust, and therefore models that you can trust as well. And I believe that for the moment we are also thinking about ethical issues, and I do believe that the Alan Turing Institute in the UK is also invested in such research. But I think this is also where research can be key, can be really interesting. Recently at EURA NOVA, the Research Centre started thinking about how we could guarantee that data is high quality. We've developed an IA model that made it possible for us to say the model has that and that many % of mistakes. And if, based on the data set, you can decrease the error margin in the data by Y%, you end up with Z% plus compared to the original model. So we're using IA to correct the data that will feed into another AI program. So it's very useful for data quality, and the new research model is based on complexity of data. The more complex the data, the more we use graph technologies that help us represent a large number of data in several dimensions with links between the data. But graph is an evolving technology. So how can we guarantee that the AI model that we will develop based on it will remain consistent? Will remain the same. Researchers are also looking at how we can create synthetic data in order not to start from the real data. Like, how can we reproduce data referring to an imaginary person, but that could be real? How can we use that correctly? Also, how are we going to be able to encourage a model to consider minorities in order for the model not to directly say, look, this is an outsider, let's ignore him or her? Because no, it might be a minority with a behavior that is maybe different, but still very relevant and very interesting for our use, for our purposes. It might be possible to define a new use that will become a new trend later down the line. So I think this is what's at stake in terms of research. We need to think about ethical questions, about trust questions for algorithms and data sets. Yeah, this is a really interesting question for medical and biomedical applications, because we are very much limited by the regulations themselves and by the notion of verification. If you need to have your software or your approach validated, it will be validated globally, so it will be identical everywhere, supposedly. But practically, we could have more local applications, but we may not do it because then it's not where it's been validated. And if the code evolves, even though the procedures have been made, you know, even though we have procedures in place to avoid any big deviation, it's still not going to be validated. So medically, you have to either have a fully standardized solution, which could be, you know, it would probably be better to implement it at a local level. In hospitals, there's a big question as to cloud or no cloud. Inference, for example, in a hospital area, in a hospital context, does not necessitate to use the cloud, but some other applications do, and there are a lot of questions in that respect, and I think it will be really interesting to manage. Not by me, I'm not the one who's going to manage, but it's going to be a very interesting field. If something needs to be adapted, do we adapt it globally and have it validated? Because every time that there is a significant change in the software, you need to have it revalidated. And that raises the question of what is a significant change in machine learning? If you say in the software, we now have, you know, a general architecture, it works. Basically, this is what they check. They check that the results are consistent and that it works, that it just that it operates and that it does what it's supposed to do. And, you know, that if you hit it with a hammer, it continues to work and it does what it's supposed to do. But if you tweak something or readapt something, how do we define whether it's significant or not? And there's a big question there in the industry, not just in the medical field, but in the industry, to determine what significant means. And we have no solution. We have no one size fits all for that. And we must make sure that the economic environment, that the institutional environments adapt to the technological changes so that we may have the freedom to experiment. Because if we let a code evolve locally, if you readapt to the statistics in terms of hospitals' patients recruitment, how do we consider if it deviates too much from the authorized solution, or if it's okay? In France, we have a ranking of hospitals, which is quite a fun thing to look at when you know hospitals. We have some departments where there are a lot of people who die, like oncology departments, and it skews there's a bias in the results because there are more people who die there because they have a big oncology department. It's the same for IA. Do we take into account who enters the system in order to assess the output, basically? How do we regulate efficacy? How do we, and it's what my colleague said about minorities. It's true that medical imaging is always abnormal. It's never standard. So there are many questions that are raised and many interesting issues to study. Thank you very much. Well, I guess I am pretty much at the end of my questions. I guess maybe I can leave the floor back to you if you have a word of conclusion for this roundtable. You may, of course, give your key message. Yeah, we do have a bit of time for questions as well in the room, if there are any. Yes, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I do have a question for Jean-Baptiste. I might be completely wrong, but I think in the past, medical data, especially imaging data, you don't really have access to the raw data from the machine, do you? And I think in the field of photography, it's very useful to have access to the raw data. So differentiating between two methods, will that not be completely spoiled by the fact that since it's not the raw data, a lot of information has been lost already? And if it's multi-platform, multi-machines, multi-hospital, is that not going to be unmanageable? You're right, as usual, you're right. And it's kind of fun, actually, because it's a bit biased what I say, but the only companies that manage to implement things in hospitals really quickly are the ones who manage the machine directly. Who say, look, I have the images, normally an MRI lasts an hour, I will have that, and I will use the algorithm. So yes, the data is transformed, and in this specific industry, there's also an obfuscation culture. So the formats aren't easy to use. It's not standardized from one machine to the next, and it's, of course, very complicated. In a lot of cases, we do prefer to use raw data, but for that, we need to have access to raw data, and we don't always. So sometimes we need some specific authorization to get the raw data that we can use to do something else. But yes. Are there European efforts for you to, or push to force manufacturers to give access to raw data? I have no idea. I think if the industry is interested, I mean, why not? But there are very different company cultures. I know in the framework of research, so not for my company, but we're also working on fetuses, so fetal imaging in my company. Some do sometimes have ultrasounds. Ultrasounds is not a problem. You can get raw data, no problem, not complicated. If we find something, they'll be happy. It's not a problem at all, but it's not the case for all types of imaging. I had a question for Professor Masson as well regarding machine learning tools for the medical world. You spoke of guidelines. You said that it was for the moment a little bit blurry, a little bit unclear. Do you believe that we could reach clearer guidelines? Once we speak of risk, we speak of statistics, probabilities, false positive, false negative. It's already quite complicated for physicians, for doctors to understand that. So I was wondering, is it not rather a question of culture? So once we have guidelines, if we try to translate probability or statistical data in a quality way, I think some of the meaning might be lost. And I wonder if you don't think that it's just difficult for people to understand that you're faced with a statistical tool with a performance that is not 100%. And so once you're out of 100% accuracy, it becomes very vague. I mean, in the past, you had physicians who knew how to communicate with patients, who could tell patients there's a risk and so on and so forth. But physicians were the interface. Now we have an automated tool, and that becomes very quantitative, doesn't it? I think the opposite, in fact. In fact, physicians are very used to that. They may not be used to very precise statistics, but in any and all clinical trial in Europe, you have to know about statistics, you have to understand it. It depends on specialties, I'm sure, but there is a certain notion of what's risky. And we do accumulate a lot of data from the patient to determine whether there is a risk or whether there is no risk. The physicians are sometimes interested in some data and then ignore other data. And we don't always know why, but usually they're right. And there's a whole... a physician sees things in a patient that we do not see. And I don't think physicians will be a problem in our approach. I think on our end, we must also remain realistic in terms of how much help our tools will provide. Guidelines will be difficult to draft. And they are partially motivated by who pays for what in the medical world as well. In fact, if insurances pay, if it's a purely private system, in the end, the calculation of an insurance is simpler. Even if you have an algorithm that is not as performance as a doctor, but the performance is constant for the whole population, we may use that model. That model will be the norm. The fluctuations around it can be managed hospital by hospital. In the US, it's often centered on one hospital, one type of specialty, one type of performance. I mean, there are some people who are never gotten into surgery because of statistics, so that's a problem. But if it's a more public thing, there'll be a balance between the performance you may hope for and the amount of control that is given to the doctor. But I think the hospital world is ready to integrate such tools, to use those tools, and we have to accept that it will be annoying that they use some things and other things aren't used at all, because in real life medical practice, they see immediately what works and what doesn't. There are some tools that will be ejected immediately. Some of them will be ejected for stupid reasons, but other things, physicians have so much to do, and if it's not performant enough, if it's not useful enough, even if it is useful, it will just not be used. So I think from the medical field, regulation would be very, very complicated. Everything will need to be integrated in guidelines. We need to admit that the balance will be decided by who pays at what scale, and another balance will be based on real life practice. There are some solutions that won't survive. Even though they are high performance, if they are not integrated in the decision-making process, it's not going to work. In terms of physicians' competence, we have Stanford research saying that physicians had difficulties discriminating between different types of probabilities, and it's a relatively old Stanford piece of research, but still, like, you could see that physicians, they're not statisticians. They know what works and what doesn't for sure, but I'm not quite certain that they would understand, you know, the fine print in terms of performance and so on and so forth. You were talking about causality in terms of hospital ratings as well. If there's a causality thing, if you go even further in terms of statistic inference, I think we need to take that into account in terms of the adoption as well.
Some additional information, because I find the topic very interesting. Guidelines apply to system developers and not to system users. These are guidelines so that the developer can tell the user, I have the buffer, it complies with safety, security, confidentiality requirements of the sector. And then, of course, there is also the issue of users' acceptability. And this is the core business of the startup, making sure that their offer matches demand. So I think that we have to distinguish the two. Now, in the IT world, when you use a software, you never try to understand how it works from A to Z. You know, I use Word every day, but I don't know the whole functioning of Word. So the user is not supposed to master the tool, otherwise the tool is useless. I'm sorry, but the speaker is not using his mic, so we cannot hear it. Now, there are some functionalities that perhaps we will never be able to offer. I'd like to react to what you're saying and to what is necessary to go further with the AI adoption. I think that there will be more pressure in having more precise, more accurate algorithm. So it's not about so exclusively optimizing solutions or making sure that the accident rate of the car, of autonomous car, will be lesser than with traditional cars. I think that neuronal approach is about finding optimal solutions, and at a certain point the neural network will perhaps not have the right data, even if it has been trained to make a decision on a specific case. I think that we need to go beyond neuron networks. In the US, there are major research initiatives on the neuronal approach combined with the symbolic approach, the famous neuro-symbolic approach of the MIT. I do not know what Europe is doing in that field. We talked about skill sovereignty, know-how sovereignty. I think that we should better master this field of activity. And then neural networks are energy and CO2 intensive. If you use a lot of layers, whatever the hardware that you use, this machine will consume a very high amount of CO2. So I'm sure that there is and there will be a lot of pressure to be more energy efficient when it comes to the operation of these machines by startups. Because using IA for a medical application for a cancer diagnosis, for instance, you cannot allow yourself to have 10% of false negatives. Now, of course, for an insurance, it is not as bad nor as serious. But I think that beyond the neuron network, we need to come up with a more precise rates without depleting our planet's resources. Now, this is the conclusion that I made at the previous roundtable. So, of course, I can only agree with what has been said. But 99.9%, well, when you reach a 99.9% precision rate, reaching 100% is key in some domains, but it is less key in other domains, in CAT tool, for instance. Now, a doctor is never supposed to give a 100% accurate diagnosis. But yes, going beyond the neuronal network is key. But hybrid models are not the exclusive solutions. There are also basic models that can help us, and very different tools, tools that are used in physics, about sensory calculations, for instance. Now, I'm told that my time is up. So if there are any burning question, one very last burning question in the audience. But if not, thank you for your time.